Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 137 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Joe Meade with me, and it's a little bit of a Big Ten basketball weekend recap here. We'll get into some bracketology. We'll preview some of the upcoming games. But, Joe, it was a great weekend of college basketball, and it started with a statement victory in Madison from the Wisconsin Badgers. Did a live stream for this one. It was an awesome game, or maybe it wasn't the highest or most entertaining game, but it was a really good basketball game. Michigan sort of boat races Michigan State here. They're up by 17 at halftime. They extend that lead. Wisconsin ends up winning by 21, and the Badgers slay another giant, Joe. Obviously, this game was probably pretty close in spread, but Wisconsin got the victory, and they did so handily.
Yeah, talk about a heck of a week for Wisconsin. And then, you're toward the top of the Big Ten standings, particularly if you're a Michigan, a Purdue, and even a Nebraska. You're probably very happy with your Wisconsin counterparts right now. Getting into the actual gameplay itself, Nick Boyd looked unstoppable. Even Tom Izzo in his press conference toward the end, at the end of the game said they couldn't simply stop Blackwell or Boyd. And you look at Michigan State's shooting percentage, you think they shot out of this world bad. They didn't really, 34% from threes, not terrible. They did miss some open looks, but it wasn't as if they were like the worst shooting team on earth, which at times I know Michigan State fans have complained about that over the last 3 years. But really, this game, Sean, what it came down to me was Wisconsin stretched out a lead. And normally with Michigan State, you always feel like they're going to cut it down. You saw that even in the games they lost, the Michigan game, the Nebraska game. This one, not even close. And even the Minnesota one, too. That was the one I was forgetting. This one shot, Wisconsin just keeps them at arm's distance the entire game. Whether it was timely shots from Blackwell, Boyd, I don't think the bigs had to do much. The ones draining threes against Michigan didn't have to do anything in this one. And Wisconsin hits 15 threes to beat the other team from the state of Michigan. And you kind of look at this, Sean. They get good contributions from Rhodey. They get good contributions from the bench wrap as well. But really, there were only six guys chipping in. That's what makes this most amazing. Normally, you see that from a team, six or seven guys chipping in against Michigan State. And that really ends up costing them. This is one of the few times I didn't, just because they shut the damn lights out.
Yeah, they and defensively, I think Wisconsin really knows their limitations, and Michigan State's is not like qualified to exploit those. Like you can get Wisconsin into some favorable one-on-one matchups and go from there, but they really tried to protect the paint this game, and they made Michigan State shoot a lot of bad shots in terms of inefficient, like contested mid ranges, even some threes from players you don't really necessarily want shooting them. I think they banked on the fact that Michigan State wouldn't shoot it great and that they'd be able to get the rebound. That was the second part of it. That, yeah, well, yeah, of course Michigan State didn't shoot it great, but Wisconsin was able to do enough on the boards and then put the ball in the hands of their two guards, Joe. And these two they're turning into, it looks like one of those guard duos that might be able to take this team a little further than we thought. They're both having really good games at the same time now, and I know they have some flaws in the front court, but when your guards play like this, you don't have to do much other than rebound misses.
Yeah. And the other
And
thing, too, from Wisconsin, Sean, is now it's proof of concept. You could say you beat one top five team or top 10 team, you call it a fluke. Second time, even surpassed. Third time, this is a damn good basketball team, Sean. And I know
yeah,
at times it's been hard to believe, but there's been plenty of games. I know you'll point out that people will point out the Nebraska game earlier in the year. Uh, they're a few seconds away from beating USC, a game they really should have won at home, really should have beaten Indiana on the road, if a few whistles or plays went their way. This is a team that's probably dead in the heat of a Big Ten title run. They're not completely out of it yet, probably just because of the work they failed to do at the beginning. They're out of it, but they're 2 games away, shot from only having two conference losses. That's what's crazy.
and their metrics haven't quite caught up to the fact that they did have some bad results early in the year and some losses by a lot. Like they lost to BYU by 28 on a
ECU,
neutral. They've lost. TCU's not a great team, but they're not terrible. But you lose to them by 11. You lose to Nebraska by 30, like you said. Like that is why they're still lacking a little bit in that department. I believe I brought them up to the 7 line. We'll do bracketology later, but they are rapidly rising here, and they're not going to be a team that you want to play coming up because Nick Boyd, he has really stepped up. He was not shooting the ball well from three. He was going into the Indiana game. He was 30% on the season, and since then, the 3 games he's gone 5 for 6, 3 of 5, 5 for 7. That is 13 for 18 from three. So that is, that is going to open a lot of things up for Blackwell driving the ball if Boyd, like, people were going under screens on Boyd until the last few games. So he has really stepped it up, and obviously we know Blackwell. But yeah, Wisconsin, the story of Friday and maybe even Saturday for sure. There were a couple of other games on Saturday that I want to get to here, Joe. And let's start off with your Michigan Wolverines because they come up first in the game cast here on ESPN. Michigan gets a big victory, 86-56. Obviously, that helps all of the numbers. Not that you need that, but this one really fell apart for UCLA pretty quickly. It always seemed like Michigan was going to win this game, Joe, but 30 points. It seemed like things, this might have been a little bit of a wake up call from UCLA that they might not be as safe as they once were. And yeah, to see that lead late balloon up to 30 was not good for UCLA, but Michigan gets the job done again.
Yeah, Sean, it was a really interesting week for Michigan. On the surface, you're looking at 2-0, and if you didn't watch any of the games, you get a double-digit road win and you get a 30-point win at home. But I'll tell you, one thing I'm concerned about as a Michigan fan before I start praising them is first half intensity is not there in
Yeah.
these games. And I know we're going to preview the Purdue game. They do play Duke later this week as well. Clearly, they're looking ahead because it makes no other sense how the 318th to 320th best rebounding team is out rebounding the best rebounding team or one of the best rebounding teams in the country in the first half. That's why Northwestern jumped out to that big lead. It's frankly why UCLA, who's trailing mainly like from 7 to 11 points in the first half, was able to cut it to two at the break. Simply they were playing more intense. Now, I know the argument from a lot of people is going to be, well, Michigan's just fine. They want to just wear you down with their depth. But I don't really think that's true. I think the intensity was not there. And luckily, they kicked it up for the second half. One thing I'm going to highlight that's really good is Axel Lendeborg starting to hit threes again. He had that calf injury early January, Sean, that kind of threw off his jump shot. He's still great in the paint and finishing, but if he could hit threes and force teams to, even go over screens, kind of like in a way that Sean mentioned with Nick Boyd, that could make Michigan really dangerous. Because if this guy gets in the paint with a step, he's either going to make the right pass or he's going to get fouled. And that's probably your best case if you're the other team is to foul him because his free throw shooting's not perfect. So, Michigan played well in both second halves. I think they have good momentum for whatever that's worth heading into West Lafayette. And more importantly, they don't slip up in this conference title race and they keep a 2-game lead as of today, Monday, February 16th.
And in the Northwestern game, Joe, which was Wednesday,
Yep.
they just simply did not turn up in the first
Yeah.
half. Like Northwestern does not run the most complex offensive stuff, and they were getting open shots and they were hitting them. And then all of a sudden, you look up and was it 14 or 13? It was a
Yeah.
pretty. And then
It's up to 16 in the second half with
okay, yeah,
with almost 14 minutes remaining, which is insane.
but Michigan has had these lulls at times this year, but they've also been able to turn it on sort of whenever they've wanted. And they scored
Yeah.
on 21 straight possessions against Northwestern. Now, there were a couple offensive rebounds in there, so they didn't make 21 shots in a row, but they seem to be able to turn it on when it comes time to do that, whether they're lackadaisical and don't not intense in the first half or not. And ultimately, around the 3-quarter mark of this one, Joe, is when I think it started to get out of hand. It looked like it was going to be a 12 to 15 point Michigan win the whole game, really, and then all of a sudden it's 30. So Michigan gets the 2 victories in look ahead spots, like you said, and Joe, they have gone up to number one, my number one overall seed, and perhaps this week will define whether they'll be playing in the Midwest if they're a one seed, but whether they'll be the number one overall seed or I still think with two losses they're still probably a number one seed, but obviously a much bigger week for them in terms of where they stack in this national title race.
Absolutely.
Let's go to Carver Hawkeye Arena. Joe is Purdue going on the road to play Iowa. These teams already did play at Mackey Arena this year. It was a narrow Purdue victory where people came out of that game thinking that Iowa was really impressive. That was not the case here. Purdue jumped out to a huge lead. This was double digits for the entirety of the game for the most part, and Purdue wins 78-57. Braden Smith a bunch of assists. It seems like at this point, Joe, that Bennett Sturts is the only threat on this Iowa team, and Purdue is able to exploit that, force him to take a lot of inefficient shots, and push this one out to a. I thought Purdue was going to win this game, but this wasn't even close.
What's amazing, Sean, is think about the turnaround Purdue's had. They lose three games toward the end of January. They take care of Maryland, so you're like, all right, are they back? They have that really bad performance at home against Oregon. And then they go to Nebraska, a game that they choked in regulation. Let's just call it what it is. Blow a 22-point second half lead. So you're wondering, all right, we don't really know what this team's about, but I think this is one of the more low-key, hotter teams in the country. I know people are going to highlight a Wisconsin. You go nationwide, you're going to highlight Florida, Houston, Texas Tech certainly could be up there too. But in terms of Big Ten, I think Purdue needs to be getting their respect back because this is still a really talented team with their nucleus all together. Braden Smith, TKR, and what's amazing, Sean, is Braden Smith didn't do too much in this game. Where uh, it wasn't a typical Braden Smith game. I know the 12 assists, but it's really CJ Cox, Jakari Harris off the bench hitting three big threes as well. We're starting to see some depth from Purdue. They could kind of go eight deep. I don't think they can quite go nine quite yet. I think they have seven to eight reliable options. One thing I'll say is I still think you see that drop off when the starters are out of the game,
Yeah.
particularly an Oscar Clough or a TKR. But in terms of run of form for Purdue, they're looking good. They're hitting their threes. And one thing I'm really liking from Purdue as well is they only had five turnovers in that game, Sean. They're giving their offense, which is the most efficient offense in the Big Ten, a lot of chances. And so long as they keep the ball, they're gonna they're gonna make this title race really interesting. I'm amazed that they're the third like odds-on betting favorite because I think after Michigan, should they win that game, if Michigan
Well,
slips up again, they
well, the
might be in
fact
the
that they
driver's
host
seat.
them makes them the second most likely, I think, because they can turn
Yeah.
this thing on its head if they beat them tomorrow. But
Mhm.
this one, Joe, I watched a majority of this one. It was amazing how easy this was for Purdue. I don't think this was anywhere close to how well they can play. And at Nebraska, they played a really great game. They blew it. It looked like they won it again, then they blew it again, and they gave up a 7-0 run in overtime, and they still won. So they were able to I guess, escape that one with a victory, even though they probably deserved to win. And then, like, Iowa's a tournament team, Joe. They went onto a tournament team's floor and beat them without getting out of second gear. Like, this was a really impressive victory with how easy it was. And like I said, I don't think that this was anywhere close to how good Purdue can play, which, does scare me a little bit because my Indiana team goes there up next. But in terms of Purdue, I think they're clicking at the right time. All of a sudden, they have a 4-game win streak, and they have two. They have three straight home games, Joe, against three NCAA tournament teams in Michigan, Indiana, and Michigan State. Not exactly sure how that really worked in the scheduling. I, off the top of my head, I don't know another team that has three home games in a row, but this is the right time for this team to be clicking, and they can really turn things around on Tuesday. But we'll get to that game a little bit later. In terms of Iowa, Joe, it seems like the new shine of Ben McCollum and Bennett Starts is wearing off a little bit. They've started to lose some basketball games. They're 18-7, and where are you stand with Iowa?
It's funny because I was talking about it with someone at a bar this weekend. I think Iowa and Ohio State are a lot alike. I think Iowa certainly has overperformed this year. I think our expectation for them, Shaw, was just get to the tournament in year one. And certainly they're on pace to do that. But they haven't beaten anyone that I'd say they're
Yeah, they
like
haven't beaten anybody who's
they haven't
who's
hit above
off the
their weight
bubble.
class.
Their
Like
best
I
win
know
is at
Indiana.
Indiana, and then they've
Yeah.
beaten the California schools at home. So they don't have
Yeah.
any wins above the bubble.
No, and like say
Yeah,
you want about Indiana. Indiana has plenty of wins against, Purdue,
and
Indiana,
Wisconsin.
and
Yeah,
Wisconsin. Like, Iowa hasn't really been competitive. I didn't think they were that competitive against Michigan. They weren't competitive at all against Michigan State. Close loss to Iowa State, all right. Illinois, I thought they played well for a decent amount of that game. And the game at Mackey, was in it for a large amount of time. Just the run
yeah,
of form lately. I think you're kind of right about being figured out, but I'm just gonna be honest with you, Sean. I just don't think they're that deep,
yeah,
and I think them being ranked gave people a false sense of security that this was a 5 or 6 seed potential team. I think in reality, you're around from an 8 to an 11, even an 11 seed if you really slip up here. And I don't think that they should be necessarily criticized for this. I think it was always that. I just think they
yeah.
had a run of form and a schedule that really helped them out.
And they, their analytics and metrics are great. They're still 23rd in the net last time I checked. Like I do think they're gonna make the tournament. But Joe, if they don't get like a win against a team that's like definitely in the tournament, like that could be something that comes up on in bubble conversations if they pull themselves down there. They do have Nebraska at home tomorrow. They go to Madison to play Wisconsin. They play Ohio State at home. They host Michigan. They go to Lincoln. Like there's some chances here for some victories against tournament teams. And I know they won at Assembly Hall, Joe, but I do think Indiana's resume is in a better spot right now. If it weren't for the head to head, it wouldn't be close. Indiana has two quad 1A wins. Iowa just has one. So I just don't think Iowa wants to get dragged down to the bubble because, these other teams probably have better wins than they do. All right, Joe, up next was a little bit of a non conference tilt. The Nashville Hoops showdown between Ryan Odom in Virginia and Jake Diebler in Ohio State. We previewed this one, Joe, saying that Ohio State really needed to win it, and they came up just short. Virginia wins 70-66. It feels like it was just another one of those games for Ohio State. They played solid, they played hard, they were in the game, and they were ultimately unable to get over the hump. Is that going to be the story for this year for the Buckeyes?
I think there's still too many opportunities. They have Wisconsin at home, at MSU, at Iowa, and then finish the year with Purdue at home, and even in Indiana. So they have plenty of really good games coming up. But Sean, there's nothing to me that indicates lately that we kind of had the same conversation about Iowa just now, that it's any
Yeah.
different. Bruce Thorne's a known commodity. He played out of his mind too. He is fun to watch. When he gets down there, 28 points. They didn't really let him shoot 3-pointers in this game, Virginia, but it didn't matter because he just got his way in the paint. Uh, this is where their bench is really starting to hurt them, Sean. There's such a drop off when, even a Christoph Tilly's out of the game,
And he hasn't been the same since his injury,
and he
too.
also hasn't been the same since his injury either. So you're really relying on the big three to carry. And with John Mobley Jr. out for an undisclosed amount of time, it's really unfortunate news they were dealt before the game. This was a game Bruce Thorne had to carry them. And for about 36 minutes, he did. It's just they couldn't get that extra gear. And to be honest with you, I think the Mobley Jr. injury, I'm going to blame that more so than just Ohio State, Diebler. I think that's such an easy cop out. I also think they had overall a pretty good week. They beat USC at home. I think that's one they definitely couldn't lose. They do win that game. And they set themselves up kind of nicely. You have Wisconsin at home. If you could pick off one of those road games between Michigan State and Iowa, you might be sitting back on the right side of the bubble. But for now, Sean, the way other bubble teams have played, as you've talked about in your bracketology yesterday, wrong side of the bubble. And with Mobley Jr. out for we don't know how long, they really need to one of these next three, no doubt they have to win. I think tomorrow, though, to get the momentum back, they really got to beat a Wisconsin team they played really well against on the road. They got to get them at Schottenstein Center.
They have 6 games remaining, Joe. 5 of them are against teams that are in the tournament as of now. And, like, they have 2 wins. They beat the California schools at home, like you mentioned there. I think they need two more wins against tournament teams. I think this home game against Wisconsin is as good of a chance as they're going to get. Wisconsin is really humming right now, and they're going to come in thinking that they're just going to, walk in there and win. And Ohio State's a tough-ish place to play. Like, I don't know if I trust them at the Izzone, especially if the Spartans, are amped up and ready to play that game. And then in terms of, Purdue at home, if Purdue is still in the title race at that point, Joe, I just don't see them dropping that game, especially because the last time that those players went there, they lost.
Yeah.
And they've all been there. Half the roster had been there for that game. So, like, Ohio State probably needs 2 to 3 wins against tournament teams to get back on the right side because it is a mess. I actually think the bubble's pretty strong this year. Um, but and Ohio State doesn't have a quad one win yet. I don't think. I think
The
Northwestern is.
Northwestern is like back and forth
Yeah,
between what is
but
or
I,
it is it.
but it got to 75. They got to 75 in the net, which is why that they had one for a time. But after losing to Nebraska by almost 20, I don't think that is quad one anymore. But yeah, something's got to change here because if this keeps happening, I think they're going to come up short. Like Virginia's a really good team. They went toe to toe with them for the entire game, and they just were unable to get over the line. And they gotta now earn their way back in because they have 2 wins against the field, and those teams are at home and on the bubble. So they're gonna have to win some games here. All right, in terms of Saturday, Joe, I don't know if any of the other games we really need to get to. Um, Nebraska pulled away from Northwestern in the second half. And then we had a game on Sunday afternoon at CBS. And because of the Pebble Beach Pro Am being moved up because of weather, I think they cut out some of the media timeouts in this game. Like, this was a quick basketball game, like
Yeah.
an hour 35. But it's Illinois that gets the 20-point victory over Indiana. The Fighting Illini were coming into this game on a 2-game losing streak. They get Kylan Boswell back, and this one was sort of close for a little bit, and then they're able to push it out late. But Illinois gets back on track with a victory over Indiana.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think Illinois had a poor run of form. I know they lost two in a row, but they lost it to the hottest team in the conference, and then a team in Michigan State that there's no way they will lose three games at home. I'll just put it to you that way. So, um, looking at this game, Sean, I thought Illinois didn't do anything too impressive, to be honest with you. 7 of 31 from three. I think they were just good with the ball, two turnovers. I think that's ultimately what the difference was. Indiana wasted a few too many possessions. And then if you're gonna beat Illinois, you gotta shoot better than make you gotta do better than making 6 3-pointers. I think Indiana, kind of the magic number to beat Michigan is, over 11 plus. I think beating Illinois, it's kind of in that realm. You want to get at least 9 to 10 3-pointers, and Indiana couldn't do it. Lamar Wilkerson, not as hot from three, really good from 2-point land, but doesn't really get too much help elsewhere from the roster. So, and really zero help for the bench either, Sean. That's another thing that really stuck out to me for Indiana. I don't think, in the grand scheme of things, I'll let you comment more after this sentence. Not a huge deal for Indiana, and for Illinois, you get back on track. You don't lose another per se dumb home game, though. I think each game they've lost hasn't necessarily been dumb.
And for Illinois, Joe, I think Kylan Boswell coming back changes everything. They did not have perimeter defense against Wisconsin. They didn't. And Blackwell and Boyd are great, as we said earlier, but like, had they played that game 10 times, they probably score 20 each 8 times.
Yeah.
But Boswell coming back just changed everything for them. They weren't giving as much dribble penetration. And then after that, you get a good passing team in scramble situations, and they're going to find an open shot. So I think Boswell helped a little bit in that regard. But I do think Indiana actually got a lot of good looks. And an average shooting day, they probably score 70 points on those shots. I mean, a lot of open shots were missed. But on the other end, Illinois got a lot of open shots too. And they probably score 80 plus on those types of shots most days. Now, they rebounded quite a few offensive rebounds. I think it was, yeah, it was 15. It felt like more. Seemed like every time Indiana would do a really good job of forcing a tough shot, half the battle. That's half the battle. You got to go and get the rebound. I thought there were a few over the backs that were missed in the first half, and but in the second half, Indiana just wasn't even hitting box outs. The physicality was too much, and it seemed like it was sort of teetering there between Indiana making a few shots and pulling it back to 4 or 5 points, or Illinois making a few shots and pushing it out to 15 plus, and unfortunately for Indiana, it was the latter. But some really interesting substitution patterns here for Indiana, Joe. The starters played the first 19 minutes of the second half, and they were shooting extremely poorly. I think Indiana does need to get a little bit better substitution patterns. And in terms of, Wilkerson was the only one who showed up. And, Tucker had 13, but 12 shots, only 2 rebounds. I think everyone else played poorly other than Wilkerson. And unfortunately, when you go on the road against a top 10 team, that's going to be a blowout. But yeah, in terms of this, Indiana had put themselves in the position where they go into these 2 games at Illinois, at Purdue, where they probably don't have to win either one. And obviously, they've done a lot of good work coming in, and there's still work to do after it. But, just a tough spot here with Boswell coming back, Illinois having coming off a few losses. And it was just a little bit too sloppy from Indiana to make it close for the whole time.
Yep.
And in terms of, let's do some bracketology updates, Joe. And if
Yep.
you have any questions, you can ask. I'm just going to sort of let the viewers see my spreadsheet here. Oh, no, that's not it. All right, let me pull it up. That is my scoreboard for the stream that I'm going to be doing in about an hour. All right, here we go. Big Ten. Like I said earlier, I've got Michigan as the number 1 overall seed right now. Obviously, you play the number 2 overall seed very soon. Very likely that flips if Duke wins, but like I said, nobody else really in the number 1 seed conversation would want the Midwest region. So I think if Michigan can get the number 1 seed, I think they're going to be in the Midwest, no matter what. Which
Yep.
is, where's the Midwest regional?
United
Is it
Center, which is a
Chicago?
huge advantage for any Big Ten team that gets it, because that's also where the Big Ten tournament is this year as well, Sean.
So I think Michigan is headed there, barring disaster. Um, I have Illinois as my 7th overall seed. I did give them a little bit of consideration for the last one with UConn. I think that last one is up for grabs, but I think Illinois is really clicking at the right time here. Purdue's just one spot behind them at 8 overall, so the last 2 seed. And then we go down a little bit to the 3 line here where Nebraska is. I think they're solidly in the top 3. Michigan State I have as my top 4 seed. And that is the first 5 in the Big Ten. Those are sort of the title contenders, if you will. I did bring Wisconsin all the way up to the second 7 seed. I think their resume is great, and obviously they've got probably the best pair of wins of anybody in the entire country. And then we go down to Iowa as my last 8 seed. Indiana is my first 9. USC as my third 10 seed. And then I've got UCLA as my 4th to last team in. So seed 43. And then Ohio State is one of my first 4 out. But I think you might see a little bit of variation with the teams on the bubble, Joe, and where do they've sort of all played each other at this point, but where does Indiana, the California schools, stack up against each other, being that, USC beat Indiana, Indiana beat UCLA. Don't think they LA schools have played each other, and I think they have 2 games
Mhm.
coming up. So that could
Yeah,
obviously swing things a little bit. And you have UCLA, who is not playing the best right now. They just got smoked by Michigan.
they did
I
get
think,
Sky Clark back, though. Is the good news.
and so I think there's a little variation in those 3 teams, but I think after that it's pretty cut and dry where these Big Ten teams currently are.
Yeah, Sean. And one thing I'll say is I know USC you have ranked above UCLA, but both those teams do
It
play
it
really
doesn't
big home
feel like they
games.
should be. If yeah,
Yeah. It's funny because both them have huge home games coming up. They have Illinois this week. UCLA has them Saturday. USC has them earlier on Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Those are how do I put this, Sean? Who needs that particular game more in the state of affairs? You'd say UCLA?
I would say so, yeah, because if Chad Baker Mazzara can come back for USC, and I don't have like a super recent update on that, I think he's still like day to day ish. If he can come back, not that the games that he didn't play won't matter, but the games that he does play will matter even more.
Mhm.
So I think USC is definitely ahead of UCLA by a little bit here, Joe, but they're very similar in terms of resume. For USC, 1-5 in quad one, UCLA's 2-6. They both have a quad two loss. UCLA has two. USC has that quad three home loss to Northwestern, and UCLA doesn't. They have the extra loss in quad two, so they're extremely close, Joe. And I think that their tournament hopes might hinge on the games against each other. And if both teams win their home games, then probably they don't move a whole lot. But um, neither of them are high enough for the home games to be quad one. They're both in the 40s, so it you don't get an opportunity very often to play a team so close to you in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, I think those two games are going to be huge for these teams, and I do think UCLA does need them more because they do play Michigan State next
Mhm.
on the road, and based on how the
Yep,
first game in Michigan went, I don't see that one going very well either. So they could dip even lower by the time that they actually do play.
absolutely. Sean, is there any worry for Nebraska? This is from our friend in Nebraska, Connor. Is there any big worry from Nebraska dropping from a protected seed, or they'd have to really face a disaster? Because their remaining schedule's, pretty easy. They do go out west into Iowa, but if they went, let's say, you know, 4-2 the rest of the way, are they probably okay, or three and
Yeah,
three even
yeah.
acceptable?
I just think that they already have great wins. You can't take those away. So as long as you're able to avoid a few of the Q3 losses that the Big Ten is providing this year, and we've been doing this for a couple of years, Joe. The bottom of the Big Ten is as bad as it's ever been this year.
Yep.
Those teams on the road are quad three games, which is pretty. There was a time where almost every road game in the Big Ten was a quad one, and I think about half of them are now. But still,
Yeah.
yeah, they're 11th overall for me to be out of the protected seeds. They'd have to drop to 17th, and yeah, unless they get like two Q3 losses, I think they'll probably be in the top four seeds because they have four quad one A wins, and they only have seven. Four, they're 4-3 in those games. There are only seven opportunities.
Mhm.
If you have a team like Tennessee who's 4-5 in them, you have these teams that have played 12 and 13 games. You know, I'm sure Nebraska will get a couple more, but you know, of course, you have four quad one wins if you played 18 of them, something like that. But yeah, I think Nebraska's probably pretty safely on the three line right now, and a quad three loss maybe pushes them down to four, but barring a total collapse, I think they're a protected seed.
All right, Sean, a few more here, and I'll try to get to them quick. Michigan State has a challenging stretch the rest of the season. Even their home games are against bubble/desperate tournament teams in UCLA and Ohio State. They also go to Mackey and to Chrysler. With that
And
said, Sean,
Assembly Hall.
and Assembly Hall. With that said, Sean, um, is a sub 500 finish for the Spartans kicking them out of that protected seed line?
It definitely maybe.
Yeah.
They have six quad one wins, which is obviously very good. Only two of them come in the top quad. They already have a quad two loss, which was Minnesota, I think.
Yep.
Um, and then in terms of the home games against bubble teams, Joe, those are definitely quad two, and all the road games aren't. But yeah, I mean, I could see it if they lose, three more times and one of them's a quad two. I could see them dropping to the five seed line, definitely.
Yep. John, is there any danger for the teams above a 10? So I guess he's referring to, and this is Dylan, our Indiana fan. Sorry about that, Dylan. Indiana as a 9 and Iowa as an 8. And then I guess maybe Wisconsin as a 7 even. Is there severe danger for those teams dipping
I
back
not
into
not
bubble
for
territory?
Wisconsin, not for
Okay.
Wisconsin. I do think for Iowa and Indiana that they are definitely not safe. we talked about Iowa earlier. Indiana has 3 wins against the field. Iowa has two. I would think that each of Indiana's 3 wins against the field are better than either of Iowa's. But it probably becomes like a win loss number game for both these teams. They have Indiana has 9 losses. Iowa has 8, I believe. 7. So like, look, if you get to 12 losses after the Big Ten tournament, maybe there's something to be worried about. But these are two resumes. Like Iowa's 27th in the net. That would be unprecedented, or not unprecedented, but very rare for a top 30 team to be left out.
I think SMU was like one of the few in 2014. It
Yeah,
was
it's
really
St.
weird
John's,
in
Rick Pitino's
24.
first
Yeah.
year, whereas 25th in the net. But yeah, I think these two, if it comes down to it, and they lose a couple games they shouldn't, and get thrown into the last four in, like there's probably enough to get them over the line. But there's no reason to do that. I think Iowa and Indiana have plenty of opportunities left to beat tournament quality teams. And I think one win against a legit tournament quality team probably locks them into the field, Joe. Either one of them. And then in terms of, yeah, Wisconsin's probably good. You can't take away their 3 Quad 1A wins and 2 of them being on the road against protected seeds. One of them being the only loss for the number one overall seed. I think we could see Wisconsin up in the 5-6 range if they're able to win a couple more here.
Yep. Last one, Sean. Is there any chance Illinois or Purdue kick Michigan off the one line, or is it more so? And this is from our friend Christian. I don't know who he's a fan of. Sorry, Christian. Illinois, Purdue. Is there a chance they kick Michigan off the one line, or is it just a matter of replacing one of the other ones?
I think that fourth number one seed is probably very up for grabs, and the top three are probably set. Like Arizona just lost 2 games in a row, and they only went down to number three overall. So I think there's definitely some arguments to be made that Houston could be that in that spot over Connecticut. But no, I think if Illinois or Purdue, runs the table per se, I think they probably just grab that fourth one seed, and it's not at the expense of Michigan. I think
Yep.
there's a pretty big drop off after Arizona at 3.
It. Sean, that does it for our questions. Do you want to get into some previews? Because we got a lot of huge games this week.
Yeah, yeah, we got a little bit of time.
Mm.
Tuesday we're gonna start off with the big one, Joe. I'll be doing a live stream for it, so please tune in. It's Michigan at Purdue at Mackey Arena, 6:30 p.m. Eastern on Peacock. Joe, I think that it's safe to say that this might be the decider for the
Yeah, I
tiebreaks.
think this is the decider, Sean, because I'm going to be honest with you. Michigan has 5 remaining games with a 2 game lead. I
Yeah.
assume they beat Minnesota at home, and based on what we talked about with Iowa, I assume they get that one too. So that leaves 3 opportunities for a slip up. At Purdue, at Illinois next Friday, not this Friday, next Friday, and then at home against Michigan
And
State, the
if you win
final day
one
of
of
the regular
them,
season.
if Michigan wins 1 out of 3, they get a share. If they win two, they are outright.
And even 1 out of 3 with the other two, Sean, that
Probably.
assumes no one slips up too, which
Yeah.
is, anything.
Probably.
If you watch this conference, anything but I guarantee that someone doesn't slip up. But anyway, Sean, getting into this game itself, this is gonna be fascinating because I think it's going to be a tale of two halves, and not as if the first half's not going to matter. And here's why. Anyone who remembers this game last year or who's been to Mackey Arena knows it's a monsoon. If you get sucked in, kind of like, or quicksand, you get sucked in or thrown under, it doesn't matter how hard you claw, you're still not going to get back to the surface. Last year, Michigan was down 40 to 17, I believe, after the under 12, or sorry, under 8. It was something completely ridiculous. And that place is like a dumpster fire, and I mean that in the best way possible for Purdue fans. The more you throw gasoline on it, which is leave them open for three, uh, you know, allow TKR to take that 15-foot shot, allow them easy dunks, turn the ball over, don't communicate on defense, allowing a huge dunk from Clough. That's going to amplify the fire. And your job as the away team, particularly the number one team, I'm not going to talk about the Yaxel video. I don't think Purdue's motivation is going to be that. I think Purdue is not a dumb team. They have all experienced guys. They know this is their one chance to get back in the conference title hunt from that putrid stretch they had in late January. So I think the first half of this game, Sean, is going to be Purdue's. I think Purdue's going to come out firing. I bet Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith, Jakari Harris off the bench, CJ Cox hit a bunch of threes. I think Clough and Kaufman Wren are going to challenge Michigan's intensity on the boards. And I do think Purdue might have a sizable halftime lead, anywhere over 7 points. I think 7 to 10 points. But where Michigan's going to have to win out here, Sean, is depth. We saw it in the Nebraska game. To a lesser extent, I don't want to compare Purdue to Northwestern, UCLA, or any of the other teams. Michigan's just like more of attrition per se. But that's what Michigan's going to have to do. I think they have to survive the first half, keep the game within striking distance. And I think the second half is where they're going to have to take over. And I think it's going to be really fascinating because I think this might be one of the few games similar to the Northwestern, Wisconsin, and Nebraska games where Michigan is not going to be leading a lot of it.
And to me, I think it really comes down to are Purdue's like runs and swings going to be enough to take them over the edge? They have had a couple of total snoozers at home. Like if Michigan goes in there and starts the game well, like Iowa State won in there and won by 30.
Yep.
And I don't think I can. I think that was sort of a one-off. That was a fluke. But I do think Purdue will probably throw the first punch. They'll probably lead at halftime. But is it enough? Is it going to be enough to overcome the onslaught that's coming in the second half? Purdue has not been the best at finishing out games. Michigan has been great at turning games on their head. So I think it's probably going to be one that Purdue is going to lead for most of it. Purdue will probably deserve to win the game, but I do think Michigan will not steal it, but be like, really? They won that game by 5 when they were losing for 90% of it? But I'm going to go Michigan 85, Purdue 80.
Yeah, Sean, I'm kind of thinking of a similar score. I think Michigan wins this one 83 to 78. I do think this comes down. I think the extra points are just like the free throws at the end. I really think this game's going to be back and forth. I think this is going to be a really good segue into March. I think both these teams are great. You have the preseason number one team versus the current number one team. No matter how you splice it, I think, Sean, everyone's going to be watching this game other than Nebraska. Illinois fans are going to be tuned into this as well. Kind of the rest of this field here between Nebraska and Illinois is counting on Purdue here. Michigan wins this one. It's going to take a real slip up from Michigan to lose the conference title. So
And you go to Champaign too,
we do go to Champaign next Friday.
and then
Michigan does. So
you host Michigan State
and host
because
Michigan
the
State.
first one was
Yeah.
there. Yeah,
So
so
if you're
this is it.
Illinois, you really need Purdue for this one because even if Illinois beats Michigan next Friday, which I think is very possible, uh, they need one more for you to even tie, assuming there's no slip ups. But I do think, Sean, this game has game of the year capabilities. The one way I see a blowout is if Purdue from the get-go stays on top of Michigan and gets, dare I say, a 15 to 20 point
Yeah,
lead.
that's the
And
number. If their run can
yeah.
get them to 17, I think that's probably too much to overcome. But
Mhm.
if the Purdue runs push it to, 9 or 10, I think that's probably not enough.
Yeah,
The way
and the
that
other way
Purdue,
shot is if Purdue shoots the way they have in certain games, doesn't box out either, and allows Michigan and particularly a Yaxel Lendeborg to score at will. This game could get ugly. I'll put it to you this way: no result in this game, Sean, would
yeah,
really surprise me.
90 to 52 could be either team here.
Yeah,
Especially
totally.
because Michigan has a tight, they're still going to have a lead in the Big Ten, leaving Mackey Arena, whether they win or lose. And they
Mhm.
have Duke up. Like, I don't think we're going to see like a load management situation here, Joe. But if you get buried, maybe there isn't the biggest amount of threat to push back if you're down by
Yeah,
20, let's say, because of what is looming in the nation's capital on Saturday. But I think it's going to be a great game. I can see it going either way. I think it'll be really fun. I'm going to be doing the stream, and if you don't have Peacock, tune in to me do my commentary. Um, if it's Fanta, it won't be better than that because John Fanta and Hummel, if I had to guess, are going to
yeah.
be on this game, and they're awesome. But if you don't have anything better to do, please tune in to the stream. All right, the game on Peacock after that, Joe, will be UCLA going to the Is Zone. UCLA reeling to a degree, I would say, and then Michigan State, sort of. I don't know if they're struggling per se, but they They need to win this to finish out the season the way that they want to. But if this is anything in the single digits, I think I'd be pretty shocked.
Yeah, I just don't see what happened Saturday not happening again in the sense that
Yeah,
Michigan State
maybe
goes on
not
their
30,
inevitable.
but it might
Yeah,
be a 22-point victory that's stretched out at the
th
end or something
this
like
is a
that.
game shot Donovan Dent, a Sky Clark, or a Trent Perry's going to have to take over for UCLA. I do think the guard matchup of this game between Fears and Dent's really interesting. I think it's going to be fun to watch, at least for the time being. I just don't know if, Xavier Booker and Tyler Bilodeau can hit enough threes in this game to really, stretch this. This is similar to the Michigan game in the sense that UCLA is going to have to stretch a lead. And even the top team in the country, Michigan, they got up to a 16-point lead and lost it all within, 7 minutes. So this is what UCLA is going to have to play out of their minds. And I think Donovan Dent would really have to take over. And I just don't see how UCLA won't get tired at the end. I think this game is actually going to be pretty close, Sean. I think UCLA and Michigan State go back and forth till like the 34-minute mark. But I think the last six, Michigan State dominates. And I think the Spartans, they might not cover that 8.5, but I think they win by, a 5 to 7 point margin.
I think Michigan State's just a better version of UCLA. Joe, defensive team where the offense isn't the prettiest, but they have some tough players who can UCLA's offense is going to try and be post ups for Bilodeau and running off screens for Dent. I mean, does that not sound familiar for Fears and Kohler? Like
Yeah.
maybe there's a reason where Bilodeau and Booker make two threes each, and Dent has 20 that they can find themselves in a game, and maybe another Jeremy Fears incident happens, and there is a path to a UCLA victory here, but I think it's pretty narrow. I think Michigan State just plays their game, and they're gonna win. I'm gonna go 75-62 Michigan State. I think it'll be one where UCLA is a 7-0 run for making it interesting, but that eventually never
Yeah.
comes, and State win by 10 plus.
Yep.
All right, 8:30 on Fox Sports 1, Joe, is an incredibly important game in Columbus. Wisconsin 10-4 in the Big Ten, 18-7, looking to continue to go up that seed list, and Ohio State in desperate need of a victory against a definite tournament team. This one for me, I think Ohio State's chances will probably be dead if they don't get this, or on severe life support. One can argue that that's already the case, but if you're in the first four out, I don't think that's really true. But Wisconsin coming in, playing really hot. It's going to be the guards against the guards. Ohio State really need it. What do you see going down here?
Yeah, this is a game again. Ohio State's going to rely heavily on Bruce Thornton. The difference is Wisconsin relies on two guards in Blackwell and Boyd, and they've both played well together. So I think that the thinking man would have Wisconsin, which is why they're favored by 1.5 points as it stands, even on the road, and in spite of the last matchup. This is a game I really need Christoph Tilly to get back to somewhat of his old form. They're going to need to contest some of those threes by the bigs because if you could spread Ohio State's defense out, that's I'll put it to you this way. They better really hope Wisconsin's bigs like Nolan Winter and the Lithuanian guy off the bench whose name I will not pronounce.
Bialowskis, I think. I
Yeah,
think he
if
starts though, but he doesn't play a lot of the minutes. It's usually
yeah,
Rapp or Carrington.
yeah. Regardless, Sean, they better hope that what happened in Ann Arbor with those guys doesn't happen because this game could be over in a hurry if that's the case. I ultimately don't think it is because since that game, of course, they only did it against my team. It's been the guards killing people from three. So I'm gonna say Ohio State keeps this really close. And you know what, Sean? F it. I'm gonna say the Buckeyes win. I think Bruce Thornton is gonna will this team to a victory. I don't think this necessarily gets them in. I just think it keeps them in the discussion. And I think they're going to really need to win one of those road games or that game against Purdue to really solidify it. Like two of those four or five with Indiana too, coming to Schottenstein. But I think Wisconsin slows down a bit, and I think Bruce Thornton wills his team to victory, and Devin Royal makes some big shots later on in the game.
I think this is another similar story to the last game we previewed, Joe. I think Wisconsin's a better version of Ohio State, where you have lead guard with Mobley lead guards that dictate the proceedings, and whatever you can kind of get from your forwards is a bonus. I think Devin Royal, this is a big spot for him. Like he can have a really solid game here for Ohio State. Wisconsin's forwards can be got at. You know, Sam Alexis had his best game of his Indiana career against these Wisconsin forwards. But I just don't know if it's enough to overcome Blackwell and Boyd. And I think that, you know, they're both going to have a really good game. Bruce Thornton can only cover one of them. And I think he'll probably be on Blackwell if I had to guess. Um, but yeah, I think Wisconsin is rolling right now, and if they play anything like they have, I think they win this game. I think Ohio State will keep it close. I think they'll fight. I think they'll scratch and claw like they did against Virginia, but I think I'm going to take Nick Boyd and Blackwell in a close game down the stretch.
Yeah. First disagreement, really.
All
I
right,
like it.
Nebraska goes to Carver Hawkeye in another game, Joe. That
It's a crime these are on the same night and
yeah,
mostly the same time slot.
but 9 o'clock BTN. Iowa slipping closer down towards the bubble. Nebraska want to stay in the Big Ten title hunt. Iowa, you know, you have back-to-back games here, Joe, where the point spread is under 2. That means it should be a pretty good one. Um, these teams have already played. Let me check that while
No,
you
no,
talk about. No, they
they don't
haven't.
play. They play again
Okay.
the last game of the regular season.
Okay, so yeah, it's a big game. Iowa needs that big victory to stop slipping towards the bubble, and Nebraska needs this to stay in the Big Ten title hunt. So I could see this game going either way too.
Yeah, this game to me, I'm just going to try not to overthink it. I think Iowa's recent run of form's been discouraging. I know they're the 1.5 point favorites here, but the Nebraska coming off, let's call it two underwhelming performances, certainly against Purdue for most of it, and then against Northwestern for also most of that game. I think they're going to really turn it on here. I do think Iowa is going to probably do some annoying things against Nebraska. I just don't think they're going to stop all those shooters from making their shots. I think if Nebraska gets out to a 9 point lead, that might be enough for the Huskers in this one. If the Huskers ever have like a big run in this game, that could also be enough, barring
And they
them being
have
sloppy with the ball.
just about every time, Joe, they have.
Yeah,
Even in their losses.
yeah. So I think the Huskers uh, win by pretty sizable. I think they win by 9 to 12 points in this one. I think they just keep Iowa, 3 possessions away, which for the way Iowa plays is not going to be comfortable in Carver Hawkeyes. So give me the Cornhuskers to stay in the Big Ten title hunt, and maybe if Michigan loses on the doorstep as well.
I think, Joe, it's a similar ish game to the Purdue game for Iowa. Like, I don't think they have enough to overcome the 1 to 2, like 12-0 kill shots that are coming from Nebraska. And, you know, things have worked out when Iowa's having the lead, when they've run the ball, when they've chewed clock. And it hasn't really worked when they've had to, go on a run. It's been good from the beginning or it hasn't been. So I think Nebraska's it's just too much to overcome. Like even if I was winning by 4 at halftime, I still think Nebraska's going to win the game if that run hadn't come yet. So it's a big game for Iowa. If they lose it, I think they are going to start to get a little bit nervous. And then in terms of Nebraska, like I think their offense is well suited to move this Iowa defense around a little bit. If you've had good spacing, if you've been accurate with your passes, this Iowa defense can be got at. And I think Nebraska is not uniquely suited to do it, but I think they're suited to get a bunch of open looks, and more often than not, that's been enough to win them the game.
Yep.
All right, Joe, we've got some Wednesday games here. None of them appear all that interesting, other than Illinois going on the first game of their 2 game Los Angeles trip. They go to the Galen Center. It's 10 p.m. Eastern Time on BTN. Joe, there hasn't been a single team that has gone out there and won both their games yet. So if you're Illinois, you've probably put yourself in the spot where you probably do need to win both of them to stay in the Big Ten title hunt. But if you leave there one
Definitely.
and one, it's probably not the end of the world.
Well, not the end of the world, but yeah,
It's the
again,
end of
that's
their
fine.
title hopes. Yeah.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, Sean, is all this that Michigan Purdue game is first in the sequences of these games. That's going to determine a whole lot about where teams stand. But getting to this game independently, Sean, to me, it's can Kylan Boswell and Keaton Wagler can they keep USC uncomfortable? USC relies a lot on the three ball, relies on a lot of, one-on-one basketball. If they could turn USC over a few times, I can't see USC being able to keep up with Illinois scoring. And, you know, the
Especially if
advantage,
Baker Bazzara is not back, which
yeah.
is
And the
unlikely.
advantages Illinois is going to have down low as well. I think it's going to take a remarkable sustained, and I say sustained because we saw the USC Purdue game, offensive performance from Musselman and USC, which I think they'll make a run at it. I don't think this will be a blowout from the get-go, but I think Illinois, somewhere around the midpoint of the second half, pulls away and wins by like 12.
I think with UCLA being the second game of this trip, Joe, and for UCLA on Saturday, it will be the first game after the Michigan trip.
Mhm.
And if they lose, like we think they will, that's going to be a spot where they're going to be like bounce back spot.
Yeah.
So I think this first game is really important for Illinois. If they lose this one, I think they probably lose both. But if they can win it at the Galen Center and then, okay, we won one, end of the world, we're leaving here with a victory. I think that, I think they'll win this one, and I think the UCLA game will be a little bit tougher, even though USC, like a one-on-one play is sort of how you've scored against Illinois over the years. And I know they have a lot more length this year, but like I feel like Elijah Arenas is going to score a lot of points here, and if you can get Woods making some triples and Kofi, and if you can get it, like there is a way that USC wins this game, especially with Illinois coming off of the Sunday game. One day that's not a ton of rest for a trip out there. Um, I think USC could win this game, but I don't see it. I think Illinois is going to win this, and then you know the UCLA game maybe not, but I think they get the job done here, and if like you said that if Michigan wins, the Big Ten title race is 99% over. But if they don't, and then UCLA wins here, then not only is it Purdue on your tail, it's Illinois too. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna go Illinois by 8. I think it's a game where they're probably ahead for most of it, but maybe they don't kill them off quite
Yep.
like they did Indiana. But all right, Joel, I think we're gonna wrap it up there, just under an hour.
Mhm.
But that is we recapped the games, we did some bracketology updates, and we previewed some of the upcoming games. In terms of other videos that we have coming out soon, we have our Michigan season recap. Or did that one already go out, or Ohio
Not
State?
yet. Ohio State
So
went
yeah,
out.
so Michigan will be have already come out by the time we release this, and we'll do the last two later. And then in terms of our other videos, um, we've got a new Sports Daily College Basketball podcast out. Jerome Tang getting fired, separate video. And then we'll see what happens in the second part of the week. So please tune into those if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.